me. I knew that you would run to them before you would run to me. I knew you were close to your mother or to your father. I knew your best friend. I knew others that were around you were a support system to you. But I had to let them go so that now you could run to me. I had to allow them to go off the scene. And sometimes the death is not always physical, but the death is I allowed them to move to another place where you don't have contact with them the way you used to. And now you're going to have to come to me. Now you're going to have to make me your best friend, because God said, I've got some issues with some of you, particularly with some of you young people. God said, here's my issues. Prayer is free, and yet you seem to have a struggle to talk to me as if it is boring. But here's your cell phone, which you pay for. Here's text messaging, which you pay for in order to talk to a human being, and you rather pay to talk to a human than talk to God when it's free. That's why God is saying now, I need you to understand the priority system of what I'm laying down. That's why after a while, I let your friendships break up. That's why after a while, I let you and your best friend argue and go your separate ways. It's me. Sometimes I step right up in between you and push you apart from each other, because as long as you're all rubbing up shoulders against each other, you don't even call my name. The first person you call when you're hurt is that individual. The first one you want to tell something to is that individual. So I'm going to move them out of the way and not place anybody there. So the first one you want to call now is me. The first one you call is Jesus. Jesus, I need you. Jesus, I have no other help. Jesus, you've got to be my God. Yes, it worked. Yes, it worked. Yes, it worked. So look at Psalm 27 and in verse 10. Psalm 27 and verse 10. I love the way the psalmist writes it. When mother and father forsake me. He did not say if. He said when. It is only a matter of time before mom and dad forsake you one way or another. Whether it is by disagreements or whether it is ultimately by death that they leave you here by yourself. He said, now when this happens, the Lord will take you. He will raise you up. Yes, he will now receive you. So you were forsaken in order to be taken. You are rejected in order to be accepted. You have a choice. You can cry over the rejection, or you can rejoice over the acceptance. You can cry over being forsaken, or you can rejoice over being taken. You can cry over not having a natural father, or you can rejoice over having a supernatural father. You can cry over not having a natural husband, or you can rejoice over having a supernatural husband. Is there anybody that chooses to rejoice? Tell the person beside you, I choose to rejoice. I choose to rejoice. Because I'm not going to be able to move forward as long as these dead things are holding on to me. Watch what the Apostle Paul began to tell us. Paul said in Romans chapter 7, Paul began to tell us, looking at verse 24, he said there's some things going on here. Verse 24, Romans chapter 7, he said there's some stuff here that's transpiring. He said, oh, wretched man that I am, who shall deliver me from this body of? Well, Paul, what are you talking about? Well, what he's talking about is a Roman tactic, that when one man would murder another man, many times the Romans would sentence them to carry the dead man's body. So the person that they killed got strapped to their back, and they were sent out away with some water and a little provisions and led out into areas, and they were strapped so that there was no way to get that dead person off of your back. What would happen in a matter of days is that the dead would start killing the living, because the decomposing of the dead body began to affect the back of the living. When you carry dead stuff, the longer you carry it, the more decomposed it is, the more it's going to take life from the living. No wonder you don't feel like living. No wonder you don't smile no more. No wonder you don't have no joy. No wonder you don't dance no more. No wonder you don't want to come out of your house. No wonder you just want to sit up in your room and cry all the time. You better get that dead thing off of your back. You better let it go. Because that thing gonna kill you. I know you feel justified for holding on to it. But honey, that thing gonna do you more damage than it's gonna do any good by holding on to it. Let that dead thing go. God said, I'm getting ready to bless you in 2010. I wish I could talk about the year of 2010 according to God. But God said, I'm ready to raise up armies of lovers. And I'm ready to do some things in 2010. But I'm looking around and you got a bunch of dead bodies strapped to you. You keep touching the dead. You keep eating and talking about the dead. You keep carrying the dead. When you gonna let this stuff go? When you gonna stop rehashing this stuff? When you gonna tell me that you're not gonna preach anymore? Because when I tried to do it, folks shut me up and sat me down. When are you gonna finally get back up and say, that was the past, but I'm gonna leave that behind, and I'm gonna get up now, and I'm gonna walk into my future, because what God has for me, it is for me. You better let it go. You better let it go. You better stop touching all this dead stuff, because it's contaminating you. Do you understand the law of the Lord? The law of the Lord is that no priest could touch the dead. No priest could even go to the funeral of the dead. No priest could handle the dead because they were made contaminated. Do you understand? With the Levites and with the priests, this was a law of God. Now you understand the parable of the Good Samaritan. In the parable of the Good Samaritan, here comes the priest, and he sees the man that is wounded, and he sees the man bleeding, and he walks on the other side. I know you might want to judge him harshly, but before you do, understand the law of the Lord. That the law of the Lord said if he touched that man, he was made contaminated by the blood and the hurts of the man. There's a principle there. Watch when you're dealing with wounded people. Don't become contaminated by their wounds. Don't come contaminated by their blood. Do not allow it to get a hold of you now, to where you don't have joy, to where you don't have peace. When you're mad at folk you don't even know, folk you never even met, you're mad at them, honey, you getting contaminated. You better back up from that wounded thing, because it's going to make you lose out on the things of God. Touch your neighbor, say, not me. Not me. I'm not going to do this thing. I'm going to get up and walk on. And so that's why when the Levite, when he sees him, he passes by and goes to the other side. It takes a Samaritan to see the man and say, I'm not bound by law. I'm going to go and liberate this man. Well, to understand what Jesus was meaning, you would have to understand what the Pharisees called Jesus. In St. John chapter 8, they said of Jesus, said we not that you are a Samaritan and that you have a devil? Jesus said, you can call me a half-breed all you want to, because they were saying to him, we know Joseph is not your father. So Mary more than likely got together with a Gentile, which would make you a half-breed, or in other words, a Samaritan. He said, you can talk about me all you want to, call me a half-breed all you want to, but I know how to pour in oil and wine. And while you're bound up in your law and tradition, I am free to touch folk. I have a touch for the untouchable. Shout yeah. Priests don't touch these dead things. Do you remember the complaint of Ezekiel when God wanted him to eat his food cooked with man's dung? His only complaint was that I've never eaten anything dead and torn of itself. I am a priest, and it was illegal for the priest to do that. God said, I understand, therefore I'll give you cow's dung, because there's nothing dead in cow cow's dung. So I'll give you that to eat. No more complaint out of the mouth of Ezekiel. And what God is saying is, you are a priesthood of believers. You